To teach and improve schools through action research. And it is a beautiful, bright morning, very early, so we're very glad to have all of you. We also welcome our panel this morning, and the authors will be presenting from 4 different papers, and each presentation will be about 15 minutes. And then Danielle Stevens will provide discussion after that, and then after the discussion, we'll have time for questions. Okay. Our first presenter is Joan Walton, and she's going to be speaking about collaborative action research and learning for the benefit of children and families. We welcome Joan Walton.
Hi everyone, it's great to have you here, and yes, it seems very early in the morning. I'm not normally out and about, so I really appreciate everyone who is here. I'm going to be talking this morning about collaborative inquiry with early years practitioners. But first of all, I just want to say a little bit about how I come to be here, because I'm not actually an early years practitioner and haven't been myself. My background was initially in social work, and throughout my professional career, I've done social work education, and had my own education centre for about 20 years, where I was involved with the professional development of people in the health and education and social care sectors, and also did quite a lot of consultancy work. But then I did my PhD, which I completed in 2008. And when I completed that, I wanted to continue some kind of academic study, if you like, around my professional work, and realised how difficult that was, because once I'd signed out of my PhD, I didn't have access to journals or anything like that. And I wanted very much to stay in the research world, but realised that although there was a lot of good professional work being undertaken, I met with excellent professionals on a day-in, day-out basis, actually their experience wasn't informing the research world. And when I looked, really at all the research articles, at the published articles, at the academic articles, they weren't really in a form that was usable to practitioners. In the first place, that the practitioners didn't have access to them for the same reason that I didn't when I completed my PhD. And I really thought this was a kind of huge gap. So basically, there was a divide between the academic world and the professional world that I wanted to bridge. I wanted to bring the two closer together. And the only way I decided I could do that was to enter into an academic context and to explore how that could actually happen. In a sense, make that my research inquiry. How do I integrate research and practice in order to improve the well-being of children? Now, I have to say, the well-being of children was my initial focus, because that was my own professional background, was in social work, was in residential work with children and young people, and then in community-based settings. So throughout my specialism, I guess, has been in children and young people, though not exclusively. So I joined Liverpool Hope University, and as I joined, and this was 18 months ago, set up the Centre for the Child and Family, which had its aim to cross these two. And right from the beginning, I was trying to think, what kind of academic basis can I have for doing this? Because as soon as I entered the university, I hadn't really realised how kind of stuck in an academic mould it was. And I had read Boyer and found Boyer very interesting in terms of the fact that, going way back to 1990, he had challenged the whole idea of what the university saw as scholarship, and saw it as being solely research. And he basically said that we need to reconsider our ideas of what a scholarship is. And not only should we have it as research, but we should include teaching and learning, application and practice, and integration of knowledge across all the disciplines, and that scholarship should include all of these. And of course, as I was looking at how do you apply academic understanding into professional context, this application into practice became really critical for me. I'd always worked in an interdisciplinary and interprofessional way, and so Boyer's model really appealed to me, and I thought this is the academic understanding that can provide the basis for the work that I do within the university. And but Donald Joan in 1995 came out with was talking about Boyer's new scholarship, and saying that in order to look at where we went with this, it needed a new epistemology, and that this epistemology needed to be action research. So as I had, way back in my professional social work training in the late 1970s, I was using action research in that stage, and I tend to see my life as an inquiry. So action research is a methodology in all kinds of settings is fairly natural to me. So when I looked at this in Joan, I thought, well, this is an ideal approach for me to look at how we put Boyer's model into practice within an academic context. And the idea about why I like action research so much is that for me, conventional models of research are about explaining or interpreting the world, whereas action research is about improving the world. And for me, because my main aim is to make a difference in the world, make a positive difference in the world, and I need to research how to do that more effectively, it seems to me that action research is an obvious choice in that respect. So I set up the Centre for the Child and Family at Liverpool Hope University. Initially, actually, I was just intending this to be my research activity. I set it up as a centre because I wanted to connect with people external to the university. I didn't just want to work with students within the university. I wanted to connect with people nationally and internationally who had this as a similar kind of brief, who also had a commitment to wanting to integrate research and practice. And I knew that no one university was going to do this in its own right. But in fact, in the education faculty where I was based, decided to see this as one of their mainstream research centres, which has its costs and benefits, which I could talk about at another time. But in the main, I was seeing this as my main research interest. So how do we individually and collectively integrate research and practice across disciplines and professions to demonstrably improve the well-being of children and young people? And that was basically my research focus, and I was exploring that through the development of the centre. And at a very early stage, I was asked by a schools improvement officer in our local authority. She was tearing her hair out. She had been working with early years practitioners, and she'd been spending a lot of money on their training, on staff development options, on sending them to conferences, and they would go and have a great time, and then they would come back into practice and nothing had changed. And she just felt that a lot of the money was going, being wasted. And she basically came and said, can you do anything to help? Which was a great opportunity for me, because really I was just very new. I was taking this as my research question, and here was an opportunity to work with a professional group of practitioners to look at this question about, can we find a way to enable them to improve their practice? So I just started that with the inquiry question for myself. What can I do to enable this group to improve their practice? And so what I did was set it up as a collaborative inquiry. I'd done a lot of work on cooperative inquiry, for those of you who know John Heron, and using cooperative inquiry and taking that cyclical approach of reflection and action, people coming together in a group, looking at what it is they want to achieve, setting themselves action plans, going back into the community with their work setting, putting their plans into practice, and then coming back. And my experience of it was that if you get a group of people together who've got a passion for making a difference, that opportunity to share their ideas and their progress is really gets them somewhere. It's really rewarding. But also in terms of that, it was important for me to look at the individual within that. And I was working with Jack Whitehead, who was at Liverpool working in the Centre for the Child and Family with me, and I had explored living theory myself through my own thesis. So I wanted each of the practitioners themselves to identify what really mattered to them. How did they want to make a difference in the world? I wanted them to explore for themselves how they could improve what they did in their day-to-day practice. So what I basically did was brought the two together, brought a number of the practitioners, it was about 18 of them together, and invited them to be part of a collaborative inquiry, and just basically took a version of the research question of the centre. How do we individually and collectively improve our practice in order to improve the well-being of children and young people? So we met on a monthly basis, and we met on a monthly basis for about a year, with gaps for the main holidays, etc. And in terms of the data, what they actually did was they started to share their stories of, we started to say, why did you come into this work? What was important to you? What matters to you in terms of what you do on a day-by-day basis? They started writing their accounts, some really, really powerful accounts of you know, when thinking about their values, they say, well, why are these kind of values important to you? Where do they come from? And they'd say things like, you know, being compassionate, being kind, and a large part of what they said was, you know, they were loving what they were doing. And yeah, I've written a report. I'm quite happy for anyone who wishes to have access to any of the stuff that I've written on this. There are some examples of the kind of accounts that they have written that really powerfully indicate what they are, you know, what they have learned through the year. But in terms of my research findings, what I have, the main findings on this has been, and it's been quite salutary actually, because I have always been aware that early years practitioners with young children in any context are not valued by other professionals. And this has always been a strong issue for me historically through my professional career. So I've worked with foster carers, I've worked with childminders, residential social workers and early years practitioners. And they would go into, for example, case conferences for children, and because they were, you know, they'd be with psychiatrists or professionally qualified social workers or whatever, and they didn't have the confidence to articulate their views. So on a very practical level, I used to say, you're the person who's living with a child, you should know what their needs are. You need to be able to feel free to contribute in these contexts. So I'd done a lot of work around assertiveness training and communication and getting them to kind of role play what they did at case conferences. So I had done that a lot. But the bit that I hadn't really picked up on till I started this particular inquiry was it wasn't just about how other professionals viewed them and, if you like, disempowered them, but how they viewed themselves. They didn't see themselves to be of value. And it took quite a bit of getting into this inquiry, because what we were really trying to do, I guess, if you're wanting professionals to improve their practice, they need to become reflective practitioners. So really, a whole aim of this was to enable them to become reflective practitioners. What the conventional training programs hadn't done was enable them to do that. And so that, at an early point of the collaborative inquiry, we were trying to encourage them to reflect on what they did, and they just weren't doing it. You know, they didn't seem to have the capacity to do it. And yet they were able to talk very passionately from day one about why they felt the work, you know, what was important about the work they did. They could talk about the relationship with the children, they could talk about loving the work that they did. But when somehow they talk about, well, because it's really important, oh well, you know, it's just something I do, and no, I'm not a very worthwhile person. And if you don't think you're a very worthwhile person, or that what you do is not, that you are not significant, then actually it's very difficult to become reflective. There's not a lot of element there to reflect on. So we started doing a huge amount of work. This is where the collaborative nature of the work came in, because through facilitation by us, they would hear what other people were doing and would realise that what they were doing was of great value, and hence they began to believe in themselves a lot. And just to give one, if I've got time, just to give one story about that, there was a worker called Angela, just a basic grade worker who'd done the work for many years, and she came to the first few sessions of the collaborative inquiry. Then she gave me a phone call and said, I don't think I'm good enough to, you know, I don't think I can contribute to this. I want to withdraw from the project, is what she said. I want to withdraw from the project. And then so I said, well, can I have a word with you about it? And so I went to see her, and she said, well, I just don't feel I've got anything to offer. And then when I followed it up a bit more, she said, well, I can't write. I'm not very good at writing. And I said, but you do believe in what we're trying to do? Oh yes, I believe in what you're doing, but actually I don't think, you know, and I can't write, and I'm not very good at writing. I said, that's not a problem. What I'm really interested in is how you make a difference, how you improve what you do. So if you don't want to write, you should just tell me what matters to you, and I'll do the writing for you. So she agreed to stay to be a part of that project. So then I went and saw her, and she gave some really interesting accounts of what had impacted on her. And one of them, for example, was when she was a young child, probably about 10, and she was scared of the water, and they were learning to dive, and she opted out. And her experience was, if she opted out, no one would normally pick up on her. But she had a teacher who decided that, you know, she was going to stay with Angela, and didn't push her, didn't force her, wasn't being oppressive about it, but just in a very gentle, supportive way would come over to her and say, come on, you know, you can do it, and stayed with her and took her time, and eventually Angela was able to dive. And I think what impressed her about that was the patience of the teacher, the fact that she didn't give up on her, but she didn't pressure her either, and getting that even balance. And she, through her own work, had tried to demonstrate the same quality, and her day-to-day work would demonstrate that quality. So Angela came back, and when she told the story afterwards, I said, but you know, you're saying this very eloquently, you seem very clear. I'm very happy to write this, but you know, you sounds like you could write this as well. And she said, well, possibly I can. And she did a beautiful piece of writing. And if I just say that over the, you know, I haven't got the time to go into that now, but now she's just a different person, a transformed person. And she herself is now going and influencing the other people she works with and starting from a basic, what really matters to you. And this ties into the second main learning. Right, second main learning is that identifying them, you know, just the methodology enabled them to appreciate the significance of the work, and I've written a lot more about that in my paper, which you can pick up on. But the third one was the importance, I think what's taught them to, and encouraged them to understand the value of what we do, is that we've understood that what happens on a moment-by-moment basis is really absolutely critical. And what came to me as we went along is that this Buddhist notion of paying attention to each present moment, non-judgmentally, right here, right now, is really absolutely critical. So this moment-by-moment interaction, and what these early years professionals do very well, and in fact are improving what they do in relation to that because they've become so aware of the significance of it, is that, you know, I couldn't be an early years practitioner. I don't know how many of you have done that or what, but the amount of patience that is required for to spend with each child on a moment-by-moment basis with a young child, 0 to 4, is huge, and it's very, very tiring. Even as a parent, I used to say I'd go to work for the rest, because, and so anyone who is able and willing to spend that, you know, pay that kind of attention, is really does need to be valued. And I think what they became very aware of as well is we're all human, and if they came into work on a bad day, you know, they'd had a row with their partner or at home or whatever, and they'd be a bit ratty, and they'd have this child in front of them, it would be very easy to take the temper out or the, you know, just the irritation out of the child, without being aware that then the child might be interpreting that as something, you know, what have I done wrong? What have I done to make this person angry? And hence that can damage their self-esteem. And throughout this project, there were huge issues of self-esteem, both with the staff themselves, seeing where they got their own lack of confidence and self-esteem from, and how easy it was for the young people they worked with to develop that self-esteem, so that it was absolutely every moment that they had with that young person, that child, became critical. And then the final thing, and Jack mentioned this concept very coincidentally yesterday in his presentation, but there was a lot about, you know, the need to be kind. One member of staff was talking about when a teacher was really, really not kind to them when they were younger, and how they thought being kind was very important. They talked a lot about loving what they did and how that was really so important. And so I introduced, not that I'm a Buddhist, but very influenced by some of the Buddhist thinking, this idea of metta and the idea of loving kindness, and that really connected with them, that actually what they were seeking to do on a moment-by-moment basis with these children and young people was to live with loving kindness with the children. And if they lived with loving kindness on a moment-by-moment basis, then it had a kind of transformational impact on themselves and on the well-being of the children and the young people. And the notion is this idea of transforming the world through transforming self. That very often, you know, in a conventional training course, I will go in as the trainer and I'm the expert and I'll teach all of you what to do, so I'm transforming you, basically. That's a principle. There's a lot of people, you know, I'm going to change people how they think. But actually the only person you can change is yourself. And this combination of a living theory approach within a collaborative inquiry was very, very powerful in enabling people to realise the importance of changing themselves, and actually through changing themselves they were influencing other people in their workplace and in the wider organisational context in which they worked. And just to look, we're trying to develop some kind of visual narrative of all of this, and these are not very good reflections, but just if you're talking about the quality of loving kindness, just looking at the expression of that early years work with a child, paying attention on a moment-by-moment basis. In this, the child is playing an instrument and a member of staff is kind of imitating them. Everything they do, the child does. And then finally, I just think just looking again at the expression on this early years face as she interacts with children. That's it. I'm sorry, that's very quick, but I do have a paper, and if anyone's interested in it, very happy to let you have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joan.